Brian, how did you get interested in flying?
Well, Nigel, I have to thank my father. I think I was 5 or 6 years of age, and we went to the Edinburgh Air Show, and we parked outside the airfield off the end of the runway, and we had 4 RAAF Lightnings that were visiting, landing over the top of us. It was the most spectacular thing that I'd ever seen as a young kid, and that really kicked off my interest in aviation.
What was the next step in applying for armed forces?
Well, I started gliding when I was 13 at the Adelaide Soaring Club, and Rob Moore, one of the founding members there, he was also, I think, a sergeant in the Air Training Corps, which I was a member of. So I did a couple of school holiday gliding courses, and eventually, as I got older and older, I looked at how to satisfy my professional ambitions, and that ended up in joining the Air Force when I was 20.
And what sort of applications process was it?
Look, there were physical aptitude tests, flying what you'd call a crude simulator of sorts, all sorts of written tests, psychological testing. I don't think there's any physical testing from memory, but I managed to sail through all of those, and I remember getting the telegram in the mail, call recruiting centre ASAP, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And you started off in the Navy?
Well, I did. Look, when I was 17, I actually applied successfully for the Fleet Air Arm. Unfortunately, this was 1973, so Vietnam was in the wind down, and government policy at the time was such that there were big defence cuts, and the Navy elected, after we'd all started on course, to stop pilot training. So we were given the option of remaining as midshipmen in the Navy and becoming officers on patrol boats based out of Darwin and never fly again, or rejoin at the appropriate time and have a go at flying. But my ambitions had changed. A couple of friends I had in the Air Force, David Peach was one. I remember being at a gliding competition with him in Mildura at the time, and he said, yeah, you really must join the Air Force, and basically that started the wheels in motion. And I think in retrospect the Air Force was a better option, because we saw the demise of the Fleet Air Arm some years later.
Point Cook was the first place you went to?
Yeah.
And what aircraft did you train on, and what were some of the highlights of the CT Force?
Yeah, right. So look, Point Cook, an iconic place to train. Essentially it was an all-over grass airfield. So I was on a 100 pilots course, and previously training had been done on the Windshield, and ours was the first all-through course on the CT4. Prior to 100 course there'd been a few engineering issues, and so I'm happy to say that we went successfully through on the CT4. But look, it was just a joy being basically young, 19, 20-year-olds getting airborne, being part of the military training system. Everyone on course to a man was passionate about aviation, and it was a fantastic first step. Bear in mind, the first 3 months at Point Cook, it's essentially ground school, boot camp, if you like. I do remember day one of the course, the very first run from the crew quarters down to the gym, which is on the other side of the airfield. We lost one of our guys that said, no, the Air Force isn't for me. So after the 5-mile run, he was basically out the door and on his way home. But there's always a few casualties along the way. There's a couple that didn't make the academics, a couple of others that missed out on the flying. But essentially, I think most of us made our way to Pearce after the first 6 months at Point Cook.
And once you graduated, who gave you your wings?
Okay, so we did our course on Mackie, the advanced pilot training in Pearce. And going from the CT4 to a Mackie, all of a sudden you're flying with jet solo, you're flying formation, instrument rating on the jet, and back in those days we'd do basic ADF approaches, in a Mackie. Gin was the satellite airfield we'd use near Pearce for a lot of our training. It had an NDB there. We'd fly up and down the Avon Valley at low level, and once again, when you're a young man, 19 or 20, you start to think this sort of activity is normal. But look, I worked hard on course, and I was lucky enough to graduate Dux of the course. And Sir Richard Williams from the Australian Flying Corps #1 course, he was there and in his uniform, and he presented me with the course trophy, and and my wings. So that was a memory that still remains.
Great. And after the Mackies?
So basically, I think about a month before the end of pilot's course, you have postings night. So the assumption is by that stage, everyone's going to pass. And so I'd bid for fighters, and to be honest, I hadn't even considered flying any other type of aeroplane. So I was a one-track pony, and because I finished well on course, then myself and one of the other guys were posted to Williamtown, to OCU, to convert to the Mirage.
What did that training involve, and what did you like about the Mirage?
Well, number one is it's a fast aeroplane. There's no end of speed at hand, and once again, as a young man, all of a sudden you're flying a Mark II fighter, 750 knots indicated airspeed capability, you're dropping bombs, you're firing 30mm cannons. What more could you want? So essentially the operational conversion involves 3 months of flying the Mackie again, but this time with practice bombs, machine guns under the wings, so learning the basics of strafing and dive bombing. And then the Mirage conversion starts. That's a process of 6 months. And once again, it's a conversion phase. You fly the aeroplane solo for the first time, you do your initial formation, and then you're into the operation of the aeroplane. So you're learning air combat. So starting off with one-on-one manoeuvring, then two-on-one, two-on-two, operating as part of a formation, and the final part of the course is learning strafing and practice bombing in the Mirage. So, getting your head around the speed of the aeroplane and to stay ahead of the aeroplane. When you think about, say, 40-degree dive bombing, I think the release indicated speed was 540 knots indicated in the dive. And it was just an iron gun sight. There's no laser guidance, there's no radar guidance, and it's amazing how accurate you could get once you flew the profile and you could nail the airspeed and the movement of the gun sight pipper over the ground to pick your bombs at 5,000 feet and get them on target. We would do low-angle bombing as well. But I guess my favourite was certainly the air-to-air against other aeroplanes, learning the ins and outs of air-to-air manoeuvring, sport of kings, as they say. And once again, as a young man, it was just a gift.
Did you have any particular airframe number that you liked flying, or were they all the same, or did some airframes have different quirks?
Look, they certainly did. Every squadron has a dog, and often I'd sit in the hangar as a Christmas tree. Whatever trade it was had given up trying to sort engine or airframe issues, so bits and pieces are pulled off of those aeroplanes and used to keep the rest of the fleet serviceable. But without being specific, for example, if you had, say, 14 or 16 aeroplanes in a squadron, you'd probably have 2/3 of those serviceable at any one time. And when we would go on deployment, clearly everyone's interest level was right up there, so you'd find that serviceability was extremely good. Everyone was happy to work long, hard hours to basically go away on deployment, have a good time, and that certainly applied with the flying. So there were some aeroplanes that were better than others, some that just handled better. Bear in mind, these are airframes that had a 7.5 G structural limit, so those airplanes are regularly flying at high G. So things like flight control rigging, even airframe rigging was something. I guess airplanes bend, when they put under those stresses time and time again. So some handled better than others.
So did you deploy away from time to time from Williamtown?
Yeah, look, there was a standard winter deployment up to Townsville. That was always a fantastic part of the world to fly in during the dry season in Queensland. Straight out of Townsville, we'd always be flying out over the reef. Absolutely beautiful terrain and seascape to fly over. We had a bombing range at high range for practice bombs out of Townsville. We also had Cordelia rocks for high explosive bombs, so you could drop the real McCoy off the coast. We had a patrol boat for search and rescue, so there's always someone rostered to spend a day on the patrol boat and go trolling for, mackerel or something like that when you weren't flying. So, look, it was, I guess, a simpler world back in those days, but they were essentially bombing camps when we'd go to Townsville. The other one was exercise pitch black, which was often at Rockhampton. That was a big joint exercise that was held every year or so. Often there'll be American forces there as well, so a lot of dissimilar air combat. Darwin was another one for, I think Pitch Black once again out of Darwin, and often would have, for example, squadrons of USAF F4s coming down from Okinawa or other parts of the world, Philippines, from Clark Air Base, etc. So big operations. You could easily have 30 or 40 fighters involved, and everything that goes along with that.